Hi everybody, today we have my friend's 1967 Dodge Coronet RT in the shop. This has a 440 automatic transmission. This car already has an EFI system on it, which ended up having a problem, so we're going to go ahead and remove it and replace it with a Holley system. What's really cool about this Holley system is that the computer is separate from the throttle body, and the throttle body looks just like a carburetor. We also got the ignition system, the HyperSpark. It says Sniper on it. We're going to have to modify that a little bit in order to get it to work. Also, the wiring harness comes with it, touchscreen. This is the ignition box, the ECM, the coils, the wiring harness. Everything comes in the kit. This is the wiring harness for the ignition system. This was meant to hook into a Sniper system, which required a little bit of modification to work with our system. We just had to de-pin all of the Sniper EFI just so we could use the ignition side for the coil and for the module.
So you'll end up cutting the white wire for your points wire to go to the terminator. The pink wire is your ignition feed. We'll cut it off there. Red wire goes to the battery, and this black wire goes, and then we'll deconstruct the Sniper harness for the spark box for the terminator.
So after all the wiring is assembled and ready to go in the car, we just remove the old EFI system. This car already has a fuel pump on it and already has a fuel pressure regulator, which we're going to leave in the car. Removing this was just as simple as taking off the carburetor. 4 bolts, linkage, and the throttle body is off. Here's the old regulator I was telling you about. We do have to relocate one of the lines. I went ahead and made sure that the engine was at top dead center before pulling the original distributor out. This will just make the process a little easier going back together. We went ahead and put in the new distributor, trying to make sure everything was lined up properly. Just like any other Mopar, it wasn't lined up perfectly, so you can use a screwdriver to adjust the oil pump rod to get it sitting in the exact spot. In the ignition system, it comes with this clear cap, which sits on top of the distributor to line up your timing perfectly. There is a little tab on the end that will line up the rotor and make sure that everything is exactly set and stabbed where it needs to be. If this is not lined up properly, it will not start. Ask me how I know. After it's all set in place, we'll lock it down with our distributor hold down. Let's check out the wiring harness for the EFI now. Everything is just quick disconnect connectors. Everything has weather pack seals and stuff on them. It even comes with a few extra terminals. Everything's labeled for your fuel pressure, oil pressure, temp sensors, your fuel pump relays, your power wires, your CAN wires, all the connections that you need to just literally plug and play with this system. Now, I cannot leave well enough alone, so I actually unraveled the wiring harness so I could route the ignition wires where I want to, which just took all the loom off of here, pulled out the wires I wanted so I can route it how I like. After I pulled all the wires out that I needed, I just went ahead and rewrapped everything back up before installing it into the car. Lucky enough for me, this wasn't automatic, so I ran all the wiring through the original grommet that was meant for a 4-speed car. I mounted the coil on the passenger side inner fender. That's actually where the coil was mounted on the previous system, so I just figured why drill more holes in the car. All the wiring is loomed and wrapped neatly around the intake and the top of the engine, and you can clearly see all the labels. This is the HyperSpark module for the ignition system. We mounted a bracket on the back side of it, and we will mount this underneath the battery tray, similar to this. It's about the size of a 6AL box. Since I rerouted how I wanted the wires to go across the front of the car, we easily plugged it in underneath, and you can't even see it. Plus, we'll have a very short distance to run for power and ground. The kit is also supplied with a coolant temp sensor and an oil pressure sensor. Well, I guess I should say transducer. I went ahead and fabricated a little bracket out of some scrap sheet metal laying around the shop to mount the ECM underneath the dash. This will bolt to the booster location and to one of the extra holes that the brake pedal assembly was going to. I drilled some holes and mounted the ECM directly up to this bracket. Now the ECM is still easy to access underneath the dash, and it's tucked up high enough out of the way where none of the wires will hang down low. Okay, so let's go over the wiring. Now these 4 wires here, the green one is for fuel pump, white will be for your coil or tach or RPM signal, and then power and ground, and that is all for the computer side. Now this wire is for the fuel pump, which we already have. The pink and white wire here is for key source and tach, which the 2 white wires will go to each other, one from the ignition harness and then the other from the terminator harness. The red and black wire down here will get battery power and ground. I really like a clean look, so after all the wiring was in the car, I went ahead and loomed everything as much as possible. The throttle body is really easy to bolt on, 4 bolts, just like a carburetor. The touchscreen is operated off CAN with this little plug, which we'll just plug it into the port right underneath the dash. Moving back to the ignition system, our original spark plug wires won't work. They have a different style boot on them, so we went ahead and got a different boot kit and went ahead and made the wires. We installed the throttle linkage and the air cleaner just like stock. The kit is also supplied with an O2 sensor, which we put in the exhaust. We welded in a bung. Okay, now we get to do the setup on it. So as long as everything's connected and hooked up right, we should be able to turn the key on and it will turn this screen on, which will allow us to do the initial setup. It'll ask us questions such as cam duration, specs about the cam, what kind of cam. It'll ask us cubic inch, maybe the firing order. And at the end of this, it'll ask us to do a TPMS reset, which will just consist of pushing the throttle pedal down 2 times. This will also ask you what kind of ignition system you're running. You will also need to know what kind of fuel system you have, because Holley does offer multiple systems such as multi-port, the Dominator, all sorts of different systems. You also need to know what fuel pressure you have, which later we'll also adjust in our system. This system has a 1-bar map sensor inside the computer, and that's what we're going to use, and we are not doing any kind of boosted applications. After all the questions are answered, it'll go ahead and calibrate the computer, and shortly after that we should be able to start the car as long as everything is installed correctly. Well, that is after we do our throttle position reset. I went ahead and turned on my monitor so I can check and see how all my sensors are operating before we actually turn on the car, and also we can watch them as the car starts to warm up. Actually, before I started, I did come out here to make sure that I didn't have any fuel leaks coming from any of the fuel lines that we just put on. Now we can go ahead and start it. Okay, so now it's programmed. We also checked to make sure we didn't have any fuel leaks. Let's hit the key for the first time. Oh. So the car did not start up on the first turn of the key. This was because the ignition wire lost power when cranking, but not with the key on. Make sure you have the right wire. Okay, now let's see what happens. And that is all I have for you guys. Here's a quick rundown of the parts that I used to install this on the car. Feel free to comment or pause the video, write these numbers down if you want to. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. Now, we did have to go tune this car as we drove it around. It did self-learn some of the fuel trims, but we still needed to modify it ourselves a little bit. But that's a whole nother video. Thank you for tuning in.